All right, and welcome to another alternative factuals video. Forgive me, I apologize for the last week. I know I have not been making the same amount of videos that I usually would, and I'm sorry, and I really deeply apologize. But it's a new week, and we can kind of start this relationship all over again. I can take you out to dinner, movie, all that stuff. But today I wanted to talk about something very interesting, or just, after the boys kind of have not necessarily settled down, but it's not as hype, but something I've kind of been thinking about that I think a lot of people might agree with. And I think the original 7, or the 7 that's from Amazon's The Boys and Vought Industries and all that stuff, I feel like in a lot of ways they were a lot more efficient and effective as heroes compared to like teams like the Justice League or the Avengers. Now, in this comparison, I'm not going to be comparing them too much to the Avengers, simply because in the comics the Avengers have done some very scrupulous things or interesting things, simply because why not. But also, it wasn't for the sake of effectiveness, but just that's just how they write sometimes in Marvel comics. But I want to focus more on the Justice League, and the reason I'm going to do this is for the sake of the comparison. Is the Justice League for the most part is the Boy Scout of the two when it comes to the two major powerhouses between DC and Marvel comics. So the Justice League is less likely to do something that is way out of control, at least in the main continuity, not some Elseworld, not like the Injustice universe or anything like that, or the crime syndicate that takes place on a different Earth in the Justice League comics, well, DC comics. But in the Avengers comics, Marvel comics in general, the Avengers have done things like sent the Incredible Hulk off planet, even though that was a colleague and a friend. They've erased Captain America's memories when it was completely unnecessary. But I mean, let's kind of just get to the usual. But before I dive into any of those specific details or anything like that, but all that jazz, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you're feeling, and let me know your opinions about this. Let me know if you disagree. It's perfectly fine to actually disagree with this subject matter. It's perfectly fine. It's okay. And without further ado, let's kind of discuss it. All right, so this conversation, or even just my thought pattern, or let me kind of guide you down how my train of thought actually worked. So I forget what episode it was during the first season of The Boys, but it was something the Homelander said when he was trying to save the plane full of people, and he was speaking to I forget her name too, but Queen Maeve. Basically, she's the Wonder Woman of the group, and then obviously Homelander is the Superman of the group. Ultimately, Homelander says something very interesting that is very true and very accurate. So he's basically, the plane is slowly descending because the plane just was taken over by terrorists, and for the most part the plane is just descending, and these people are freaking out. And Queen Maeve actually walks up to him and says like, hey, is there any way we can save these people? He was like, there's no way we can save these people. 1, we don't know how to fly this plane. 2, he accidentally lasered the controls, so there's no way he can go outside the plane and stop it. So that was already off the table. Now, a lot of people would suggest already that, or maybe even just the way that they see it in like DC comics, when it comes to Superman stopping planes, and even Supergirl or any superhero who has superhuman strength, they would go out, fly, push against the plane, and then slow it down. Now, there is a channel out there I think a lot of people are well aware of, and it's called Because Science, and he did a video about this explaining how this doesn't make sense. And I've always wondered this in comics, and it makes absolute sense. There is no way he can actually go out there and actually guide the plane down or push it, because at that velocity, that single point of impact in which he's applying tons and tons of pressure would actually rupture the plane even further, killing everyone in that plane regardless. So in a lot of ways, even though he was an absolutely terrible superhero, he was down to kill, rape, he was down for anything that was scrupulous in terms of, just he was a full-blown sociopath, and he just had those antisocial tendencies, all that stuff. There was something really wrong with his head, but he was actually very right. And even the way that they run Vought Industries and the way that they run a lot of their superhero teams, it is actually very much effective, because in reality, no matter how powerful a superhero is, unless they are reality warpers, there is no way that a lot of these things, if it were to take place in the real world, they would work out the way that they do in comics. So I'll give you another example. Let's say A-Train, for example. He is somebody who is a speedster. Now, when it comes to DC Comics, you have the Flash, someone who doesn't kill. I've never really seen him do anything too crazy or out of control for the most part. He doesn't kill, but his perception in terms of his speed, basically he perceives everything slower than him, but I'm pretty sure that's not quite how that works in terms of how you view things when you're running at super speeds. Now, his view and how he perceives time is related to the fact that he draws power from the Speed Force, but if I were to say like someone like Quicksilver from Marvel Comics, they never said like how his mind perceives him running. So in theory, he shouldn't really be able to see too much of going on, or see too much that is going on. If anything, he would develop this kind of tunnel vision where he would see what's in front of him really, but he wouldn't really be able to kind of accept or kind of process what's on the side of him, meaning he would actually be running into hundreds of people probably within a year, simply due to, you know, him running away from villains or him trying to get the compound V. But ultimately he would just be running into tons and tons of people just due to collateral damage. So that's basically how that works. A lot of these powers that people think is super cool, but if you really bring them into the real life, they would be a serious problem for society, simply because it's not really, you know, ideal. Now, having said that, now bringing this into the real world, Vought, the Seven, basically how they operate is they weigh their options basically, and they say, okay, let's say this is what we have going on. Let's say we have a robbery right now, and let's say Homelander isn't available. Let's say A-Train isn't necessarily available. Let's say you have Black Noir and you have, I don't know, the Deep. Basically they would assess the situation, and, you know, based on the heroes that they have access to, they would evaluate what's their success rate. And also they had things like satellites and different things like that that did a lot of the work for them, supercomputers, all that stuff that did that work for them, so that way they would get contracts with the city or governments, and basically that was funding their whole thing. But that's just a little side note. But basically they would assess the situation and see what would be the most effective way of taking them out if they can, based on the amount of superheroes that they have available to them, whether it be the original 7 or it be some sort of B-list or C-list hero that has powers that are quite capable of dealing with the situation accordingly. So in a lot of ways they function a lot better and efficiently than the Justice League, even the Avengers, because even in the movies, even in the comic books, a lot of the time they would just dive in there, they wouldn't assess the situation, they wouldn't figure out the best route to do it, and often they would actually cause things to become a lot worse simply because they didn't assess what was truly happening. Now, for the sake of this argument, just so I can kind of have a comparison, now imagine if Tony Stark or, you know, Dr. Banner, or let's say even Shuri from Black Panther, let's say if they all put their minds together, made this super mega quantum computer, something that was able to calculate probability the same way or similar to what they did in The Boys when it came to the Seven, as well as how they operated and dispatched their heroes. They would be a lot more efficient as a team, because it would evaluate most situations that they would deal with almost down to like a very minuscule amount of error, and then ultimately they can go in there confident, and then they will be able to do it efficiently, effectively, and quickly with the least amount of collateral damage. And even if there is collateral damage, for the most part they would be covered, because, you know, they would have lawyers, or just overall it would just be a better experience. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I justifying any of their behavior when it comes to the way that they go about things in their personal lives, or the way that they go about things when it comes to the way that they achieve their powers, and nothing like that. But the way that Vought Industries actually went about all this stuff, government contracts, insurance, and lawyers, and just even the simple fact that they had efficient ways of kind of figuring out who did what when it came to the criminals and the crime in these different cities and places, it was actually highly effective. And I actually, to some degree, kind of agree with it. And I don't know, I kind of want to see what you guys feel about it. I know it's a little bit of a stretch, and it's a little crazy actually, but I had this discussion with somebody and I kind of want to know what you guys think about it. And do you really think the boys should be even attacking the heroes? I mean, yes, they have personal reasons, and I probably would do the same thing, but let me know on paper, does it make sense for them to attack the heroes who actually effectively can have decreased crime in these cities and various different locations, just due to how effective and efficient that they operate throughout Vought Industries and all that jazz? But if you're new to the channel, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below and let me know what you think, feel, and all that jazz. And I hope to see you later on. Peace out.